this lecture is going to actually be combined for both chapters 17 and chapters 18. I've provided you with a website that gives a really nice overview of different types of both traditional fuel sources, what we would call non-renewable fuel sources, and also it does a great job overviewing some of the the renewable energy sources. So rather than spend lecture time going through those, what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine chapters 17 and 18. I'm going to talk about the points that aren't covered in those energy videos. So really in chapter 17, all I'm going to really talk about is energy consumption. You can learn about coal, oil, natural gas, and nuclear energy by watching those short videos on the website that I've provided to you, the Energy 101 videos. So then what I want to just discuss is basic just energy consumption. So as a society, we depend on energy. And if you remember, we actually have talked about energy before. Previously, when we were discussing energy, we discussed it with reference to ecology and ecosystems. We talked about how energy from the sun is actually captured by green things that can photosynthesize plants. They can turn it into a type of chemical energy that can then be passed along through food chains. So the same type of energy that we were discussing in ecosystems, we can also talk about when it comes to humans' need for energy. It's not a different type of energy. It's the same kind of energy we've been talking about before. The only difference is where we're extracting the energy from and how we're getting it. So we use it for every purpose of our life. We use it to keep a living temperature, our homes warm or cool. We use it to grow our food, store our food, cook our food. We use it to be able to extract all of the natural resources we use for making things that we use every day. We use it to get around. There isn't really anything we can't do without some form of energy. Per capita consumption of energy is much higher in developed countries versus developing countries, and that makes sense. Here in the developed world, we have a lot more things that we use that require energy. So it's not just our cars, it's all of our gadgets. It's all of the things we have at home. It's our homes themselves. All of those things require energy, so we consume an awful lot of energy. In the United States, 30% of energy is actually used for industry. 41% is consumed by buildings, and 28% then is used for transportation. So the fastest growing areas that are actually using the most energy worldwide happen to be those big developing countries, places like China and India. They are the ones who are using more energy to meet the demands of, number one, their growing population, but also number two, as they industrialize, as they begin to have more manufacturing, as they begin to have more exporting, they need energy to be able to do all of that. So what we see is if we look at per person energy consumption, so this is per person, actually Canada beats us, interestingly enough, but United States, here we are, and then you can look at sort of what we're going to call developing or moderately developed countries like Mexico and Egypt, and then developing countries like India and Nigeria. They barely use any energy per person, but again, that's reflective of the fact that they don't have a lot of stuff that requires energy. But if you look at the trend in energy consumption, what we see is that these developing countries are quickly increasing the amount of energy they need, again, to meet the demand of growing population and also industrialization. Interestingly enough, in developed countries, we see our energy consumption going slightly down, decreasing slightly, and we think that will continue on in the future. Why is that? Are we all of a sudden going to stop needing all the stuff that we need? Probably not. It's probably more of a result of actually that we will have better efficiencies. And we're going to talk about energy efficiency in a little bit, but it basically means our technologies will need less energy in order to be able to function. So because of that, we ourselves as a developed world will need less energy. So again, that's it for this chapter. I'm going to let you go through my notes and watch those Energy 101 videos to learn about the different sources of power. I'm going to move next into chapter 18, which is the renewable energy resources, also called alternative energy sources or green energy sources We've got lots of different names for them. One thing that the Energy 101 videos don't talk about is a little bit about some passive types of energy using solar energy. So I am going to discuss that a little bit, and then I'm going to jump down to energy solutions. So using the sun, we call any energy that uses the sun directly direct solar energy. So direct solar energy would be, for example, if we were using solar panels. Okay, we're directly using the sun's energy to make electricity, for example. But we can also use the sun's energy to do things other than just make electricity. We can use it really basically to heat buildings and waters. There's something called active solar heating, in which you basically take solar energy and pumps and fans distribute the solar energy around. You can use it to heat water, basically. You can use it to heat swimming pools. It's a way that you can actually use the sun's energy for something in your home other than just generating electricity. We also have something called, and this is what it would look like if you were going to use this active solar energy. And again, you're not generating electricity. What you're simply doing is you're heating up water and holding it in a hot water tank. So it's an alternative to a traditional hot water system. The other thing I want to talk about quickly is something called passive solar heating. Passive solar heating is just good building design, is what it is. It doesn't require any mechanical devices. What you do is you design a building where you take advantage of features in the winter to keep the building warm and in the summer to keep the building cool. So it's things like putting in south-facing windows. South-facing windows will receive a lot more light, especially in the winter when the light is, when the sun's angle is not as high in the sky. It's actually fairly low. So you want to get as much as the light into those south-facing windows as possible. So what you do then is you design your buildings in ways that you can take advantage of these. You have overhangs over those windows in the summer so that the sun's angle is higher in the summer, so it won't actually beat down into those windows. And so it's just a design process is all it is. In order to take advantage of these features, though, you have to have a really well-insulated building to maintain the heat that you're capturing from the sun coming into those windows. And it can save about 50% on heating costs. So this is an example of what it would look like. Again, in the winter, the angle of the sun is lower, so it can come directly here into these south-facing windows. You have stone floors that will absorb that heat and radiate it back out. Then I'm going to jump to the very end, which is energy solutions. We're going to talk about the difference between conservation and efficiency. Energy conservation is using less. So we're conserving energy by not using it. Energy efficiency is using technology to reduce the amount of energy we need to do a certain task. So energy conservation, turning the lights off when you leave a room. That's a really easy one. That's something hopefully we've all learned. If you're not in a room, turn the lights off. That's energy conservation. Energy efficiency would be replacing the light bulbs that you're using in your room rather than using those old incandescent light bulbs, which, by the way, are being phased out here in the United States. You won't be able to buy them anymore soon. Instead, you're going to use more energy efficient light bulbs. You're going to use either CFLs or you're going to use LED bulbs. Whatever it happens to be, both of those alternatives give you more light using less energy. That's an example of energy efficiency. So even though here in the United States we're becoming more energy efficient, we're still consuming as much because we have a lot of stuff, and I kind of mentioned that before, is why our per person or our per capita consumption is so high is the fact that we just have so many things that require energy, and that's why we have such higher rates as compared to those in developing nations. But again, the greatest increases are those places who are actually actively trying to become more industrialized. So China and India in particular, they have large populations. They're trying to do more manufacturing and more exporting, and so they are growing their economies, and in order to do that, they need energy. The other issue that we have, I can't say issue, the other challenge that we have is that the technology that they're using to bring energy online isn't efficient and it isn't clean. It's actually very dirty. They're basically using coal. As you'll learn in those Energy 101 chapters or videos, coal is cheap and coal is plentifully available and everybody can use it, but it happens to be extremely, extremely dirty. So you have a bunch of coal-fired power plants coming online in places like China and India, which on the one hand is great. People get electricity. Yay, electricity is wonderful. The downside to that is they are suffering the consequences of that, including massive amounts of air pollution. So there's a trade-off that we have, the desire for countries to become economically advanced or developed, and the desire to lessen our impact on the environment. And it's a difficult thing to do. If the cleaner technologies can be made available to those countries at a price that they can afford, that potentially can be a solution for the future. But for right now, there's not a whole lot we can do other than encourage greener development. So again, I showed you this before. This was the per person energy consumption. Developed countries have a much higher per person than the moderately developed and the developing countries. So what are energy efficient technologies? I gave you the example of light bulbs. We also have appliances. Energy Star rating, if you or your parents have ever bought an appliance recently, maybe you've seen the little rating that says this is Energy Star rated. It simply means that it uses less energy compared to similar models. You might pay a slightly higher premium for an Energy Star model appliance, but it'll pay off in the long run because you're going to pay less in electricity costs to run it. So we already talked about those CFLs and the light bulbs. They require only a quarter as much energy, and they last about 15% longer. That's why incandescents are being completely phased out here in the United States, because they're not efficient, they use a lot of energy, and they don't last very long. And so because we have alternatives that are relatively inexpensive, not quite as inexpensive as the incandescent, but very similar in cost, we're phasing those out. And that way people will have to start buying, again, either CFLs or LEDs, or lights that are similar to that. We have furnaces that can burn 30% less fuel. We have buildings that use up to 90% less energy. Our refrigerators today use 3/4 less energy than they did in the 70s. Our automobile efficiency has dramatically improved. We have lighter automobiles. They're designed better so they don't have as much drag as they drive, and the engines that they're using don't have to use as much fuel to get just as far. So all of these are examples of these technologies, and we assume that these advances will continue on into the future. Well, our appliances will be just as efficient, if not more efficient, and our cars will be able to go longer distances on less fuel. And our lights will last longer without having to use very much electricity. That's the idea behind these energy efficient technologies. It's a way to look at the problem of decreasing fossil fuels. Okay, how do we combat that? How do we cope? And one of the ways we can actually cope is to increase our efficiency as well as looking to those fuel alternatives. That shows the passive solar heating again, so that was just another example of that. The last thing, I'll mention this really quickly. There are some companies, including actually our electric company, ComEd. If you do live in the suburban Chicago area, you probably have ComEd as your power provider. They will actually give you incentives for switching to more energy efficient technologies. So if you buy new appliances that are Energy Star rated, you can send in a rebate form and get $100 from them because they want you to have these energy efficient appliances. It pulls less on the electric grid and saves you money and also them money. They also have programs where you can get CFLs. You can have them haul away your old appliances. So there's a whole host of ways that electric companies are actually trying to encourage some of this efficiency themselves. It's not out of the goodness of their heart. It saves them money in the long run, but it's also nice to take advantage of those programs as well. At home, again, things like we talked about before. You can actually buy those energy efficient appliances. You can change out your light bulbs. You can make sure that you have proper insulation. That's a huge one. That's going to save you an awful lot of money, making sure that your home is properly insulated. Those are just some tips on how to remain efficient at home and save a few dollars. So again, make sure you watch those Energy 101 videos to learn about the different types of alternative sources of energy.